Good morning and welcome to the fourth in the series of Innovate Awarding's webinars about endpoint assessment. We have around 150 people registered for today's session, and these range from a number of employers and of course training providers, but welcome everybody. My name is Cathie Smith and I'm joined by Andy McNeill, our Head of Assessment Services, to take you through the detail of assessment for two of the standards in adult care, the Level 2 Adult Care Worker and the Level 3 Lead Adult Care Worker. Please do submit questions. We will respond after the webinar and publish frequently asked questions on our website in due course. And of course you can always contact either Andy or me on the details given later or through the EPA email address. All of these details will be given on the last slide of the presentation. So the aims of today's webinar and of this session is to give you a brief background to Innovate Awarding, the endpoint assessment journey for adult care with Innovate, a look at the assessment methodologies identified in the assessment plans, and IAO's initial approach to delivering endpoint assessment for adult care, and to answer questions about what our assessment workforce will look like and what support we will provide. In terms of the format, the information provided will be based on Innovate Awarding's approach to delivering the assessment plans across this sector. There will be breaks in the presentation to ask you questions and pauses for you to ask us questions related to the sections we've covered. And as mentioned, the contact details will be provided following the section for you to be able to contact us directly if there are things you don't want to actually enter on the webinar structure itself. So moving on, a bit about who we are for those who haven't come across Innovate Awarding before. We are an independent limited company within the Lifetime Group. We are a recognised awarding organisation, have been regulated by Ofqual since 2009. And Qualifications Wales and CCEA in Northern Ireland since their inception in 2015-16. We are financially strong with independent corporate governance. That's a very, very important part of our ability to have gained recognition on the Register of Apprenticeship Assessment Organisations. We have had to evidence capability and capacity, which we've done through our 30,000 learners registered through Innovate in 2015-16 as an example of volumes, which has placed us in the top 40 of 155 UK awarding organisations. And of course currently we offer apprenticeship framework qualifications in a range of sectors which link directly with the sectors in which we plan to offer endpoint assessment. So the Apprenticeship Standards sectors are 13, adult care, business, children, young family. I won't read all these out because you can see and you'll be able to access this information later. Our aspirations are for over 50 standards in those sectors, and we have a rolling programme for EPA applications. Unfortunately, we can't apply to the SFA for approval to deliver until the standards and the assessment plans are themselves ready for delivery. But we are on a roll with these, and we have so far 14 standards approved so far, and these are the details. We have 2 more in the pipeline, Senior Chef Production Cooking, Public Service Operational Delivery Officer, which we submitted last month, and we should hear about those in April, sometime in the 3rd week in April. The process takes about 2 months from submission to the result, so we wait to hear the result of that with interest. So our proposition for adult care is that we will be publishing clear and transparent costs, and I'll talk a bit more about those at the end of the presentation when Andy has gone through the process. Obviously we will be able to offer the Level 2 and Level 3 diplomas in health and social care as they are currently on the QCF. Andy will talk again about what is happening with those qualifications because they are being reviewed. We will not charge an upfront registration fee, although there is a requirement for you to register who your learners are and where they are located fairly early on in the journey, as we have to prepare for the geography. And you will be able to register on our new IT system, especially designed for endpoint assessment, which we are currently developing. And phase 1 is shortly to be available for piloting, so we'll be in touch with people who've already expressed an interest on that. A very important part of our offer is the EPA manager, who we will be appointing for each sector. They will be the go-to people for that particular sector, even before the gateway, to advise on any issues or questions regarding assessment. And we are currently recruiting these guys, and they will be appointed very, very soon. We aim to produce a qualified workforce of assessors, and Andy will talk a bit more about what that looks like. A full package of support materials and training. E-certificates for each assessment component too, and that is quite an important part of our offer, as well as the certificates for those embedded qualifications within the standard. And of course the final apprenticeship certificate will be generated by SFA, so there is quite a change in that process. Innovate Awarding will be responsible for generating that information to the SFA, and we gather that the process should be fairly swift. Their undertaking is to get those certificates off to the employer by recorded delivery by the 20th day from submission. Now I'm handing over to Andy to take you through the specifics of the EPA journey. So over to you, Andy.
Okay, thanks very much, Cathie, and welcome everyone. Now, as Cathie mentioned, what we're going to do is we're just going to touch on the endpoint assessment journey for this sector. And any of you who perhaps have attended any of our previous sessions that we've run, this is the fourth, as Cathie mentioned, the fourth webinar. The last one was hospitality, which essentially covered 4 different standards, all of which were particularly different. And that took the full hour, as you can imagine. As for today, the expectation is that we're covering 2 standards, for which they're both very similar in terms of the design of the assessment. So in terms of time, I don't know the exact finish time, but we might finish just a tad earlier, but we'll cover all of the specifics in relation to those assessments. Now, before we begin, I think it's worth just touching on the full assessment journey from start to finish. And in terms of what we are thinking about in terms of start, that really is from the gateway. And the gateway is when the employer, the training provider and the apprentice essentially ensure readiness. They basically confirm that they are ready to start the endpoint assessment journey. And that's when Innovate will take over the process and essentially manage the assessments that are component parts of the full endpoint assessment. Now, as opposed to some other standards, the initial kind of on-program training requires quite a lot of mandatory kind of requirements to be met before the apprentice can enter the endpoint assessment journey. The assessments themselves, we're looking at, so the on-program training themselves, we're looking at 12 to 18 months. So a minimum of 12 months for adult care worker and 12 to 24 months for lead adult care worker. So it could be quite a significant amount of time where they will be completing the care certificate, which many of you will be familiar with. For the level 2 adult care worker, they'll be completing the level 2 diploma in health and social care, and for the lead adult care, they'll be completing the level 3. We'll also have to ensure that literacy and numeracy and also a self-assessment has been completed, and that's before the apprentice can enter the main assessment components that are included within each of these standards. So for that, we'll be looking at the gateway leading into a planning meeting. The planning meetings when the assessors will confirm the schedule, talk about the expectations, and also try and ease any tension that there may be. And that cannot be completed until the apprentice has moved through the gateway. What we're looking at there is to build in the most efficient way of managing that process, whether that's through video conferencing, which our system will be equipped with, or also the approach to the endpoint assessor, being able to meet with the apprentice before they start the assessment journey, but obviously not before they've actually gone through the gateway itself. All scheduling will take place within our IT system, and Cathie mentioned the IT system, and we'll refer to that throughout the course of today, and that's used by all stakeholders for the process. And as far as possible, what we'll be looking to do is schedule our assessments as early as possible, what we're also looking at there is providing some real guidance for our centres in terms of what the indicative journey looks like in terms of not only the order, and you'll see the situational judgment test must take place before the professional discussion, but also the timelines between those things happening, so from gateway to completion, and the sorts of indicative journeys that may include. Moving on, we talked about the mandatory requirements before endpoint assessment can begin, and what we will be checking for as the independent endpoint assessment organisation is that the apprentice has achieved each of the requirements for either the adult care worker or the lead adult care worker. So an example would be that the apprentice who's on the who's moving into the endpoint assessment for adult care worker would have achieved the level 2 diploma in health and social care. They would have achieved the care certificate. As they're at level 2, they would have achieved the level 1 literacy and numeracy. And also they've undertaken self-assessment in the last month of the apprenticeship, and that's to enable them to see that they're confident that they have taken on board all aspects of the standard, because that's essentially what we're going to be assessing. The qualifications are as follows. We've talked about this in the previous slides, but the adult care worker, level 2 diploma, which you'll all be familiar with, and level 3 diploma for lead adult care worker. Now there are new qualifications in development, and they're in development to support transition to RQF, and qualification titles are due to change. But the position of the employer group remains that qualifications should be included and are mandatory within the standards themselves. And those standards will be reviewed in line with the changes to the qualifications. So it's just an important note on that. Just while we're here, specifications will, for the new qualifications, available through Skills for Care website, and these slides will be available after today, so you'll be able to click directly through that link. Skills for Care are the external quality assurance organisation for this sector, so they will be carrying out the external quality assurance activity in regards to endpoint assessment organisations, and obviously their role in this is pretty significant, and we'll touch on that through the presentation itself. Qualifications will cover mandatory content of specification, and optional units will be based on specialism. At level 3, this will include content to support the development of leadership skills. And in terms of the indicative timescales for those qualifications to launch, we're looking at January of 2018. Okay, so before we start looking at what the assessments are, we'll just touch on what exactly we'll be assessing through the two components of the endpoint assessment journey. We'll be looking at the knowledge, skills and behaviours, and these are all covered through the standards that are already available through the SFA, and also available on the Skills for Care website for you to see. And we based our assessment on the guidance that Skills for Care produce within their assessment plan, and obviously the guidance and the support and the live assessments we produce will follow those guidelines. In terms of the knowledge, many of you will be familiar with the standard, but just to touch on some of the elements, and these are generic kind of areas that cover across level 2 and level 3. So knowledge, we're looking at the job they have to do, their main tasks and responsibilities, the importance of having the right values and behaviours, the importance of communication, how to support individuals to remain safe from harm, and that's the safeguarding element, how to champion health and well-being for the individuals they support and work colleagues as well, how to work professionally, and that includes their own professional development of those they support and work colleagues. In terms of skills, we will look for the apprentices to undertake the main tasks and responsibilities, and that's according to their job role. Treat people with respect and dignity and honour their human rights, communicate clearly and responsibly, support individuals to remain safe from harm, and again that's actually applying the skills related to safeguarding, champion health and well-being for the individuals they support, and working professionally and seeking to develop their own professional development. And finally the behaviours, and Skills for Care and the employer group have produced the assessment plan, sum up the behaviours of the adult care worker through the 6 C's. And those C's, I'm sure many of you have heard of these, are care, compassion, courage, communication, competence and commitment. So these knowledge, skills and behaviours will be learnt whilst on programme through the qualifications that are mandated, but assessed through the 2 assessment components that we'll be covering through the rest of today's presentation. So the first element, and again there's a 50-50 split in terms of weighting, and we'll try and apply the same logic for the presentation and the rest of today's webinar, and that's the situational judgment test. Now the situational judgment test is essentially an on-screen test which is externally set and marked by Innovate Awarding. This will take place in controlled conditions, and that's in line with guidance that we will provide. We'll meet the criteria that are laid down by the external quality assurer and ensure that we manage or assessments are managed in line with that criteria that we then apply. The on-screen testing will take place through our IT system, through our Endpoint Assessment IT system. It will be scheduled but on demand, so no examination windows, as some of you may be familiar with. It will be on demand, but it will have to be scheduled beforehand, and that's to ensure that we comply with external quality assurance and also that the apprentice is essentially prepared and ready to take the assessment. Of course, we'll have a number of policies in place related to special considerations, reasonable adjustments, and we'll be complying with a common approach to our assessment development that is set by Skills for Care, and of course providing our customers with the guidance as to what these questions look like, through exemplars, through sample questions, and we'll go into our support proposition in a lot more depth towards the end of the presentation. But this is an indication of what we'll be looking to provide to help prepare apprentices to take this situational judgment test. In terms of the test themselves, it will be 90 minutes. As I said, taken under controlled conditions, and that will be 60 questions. And these will be scenario-based questions that will relate to the apprentices, essentially what they've learned in relation to either adult care or lead adult care worker. Now there are grade boundaries, and we'll go into grading with in a little bit more depth as we get towards the end of the presentation, and we'll give you some examples of how the final grading decision is made. But in relation to the situational judgment test, it is a number-based grading situation, and you'll see the numbers there. So between 40 and 50 out of 60 is a pass. A merit is between 50 and 60, and a distinction you'll see is 55 out of 60. Sorry, the merit should actually be 50 out of 50 to 55. So apologies about that. We'll change that before we send the presentation out. A free resit for all of these tests is available, but only if the apprentice achieves between 25 and 39 marks. Now, if an apprentice achieves below 25, a professional review of performance and the apprentice will need to act on those findings before they can then go back and take the assessment, the on-screen assessment again. Okay, so before we move on, we talked at the start that we would try and get some of your views in terms of the situational judgment test. So this is an opportunity for you to complete the question box within your system. And what I want you to help us with is to give us your thoughts on what we should offer as an endpoint assessment organisation to help prepare apprentices for the situational judgment test. So what we're going to do is just give you a couple of minutes just to fill in some of your thoughts. We retain all of this information, so we'll use it to help inform what our support material proposition looks like, and try and make sure that we've got a fit-for-purpose package in time for delivery to start. So plenty of time for you to look at this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, as they come in, I'm going to start reading out some of the answers, or sorry, some of the things that you've put forward. So mock assessment and example questions ASAP, and that's probably a pretty consistent thought from everyone. We've already started the development of our mock assessments in terms of exemplar questions, so that we've got an initial bank that will be ready for May, and we'll look to add to that so that we have not only mock questions but also sample papers, and we feel it's important to be able to offer a full paper in relation to that. Hard copy and online, that's come up a couple of times. And absolutely, we'll have questions that are available for you to print out and use within training or for apprentices to take away. But we'll also have exemplars within the system for which the apprentice will actually take the live assessment, so they can get used to not only what the questions are, but how to work through the system itself and how to answer those questions. And that comes with some other feedback, test trials of the IT system to make candidates familiar, and absolutely we'll make sure that all of our papers and exemplars are available within that system. Some example answers. Now it's interesting, I think the majority of these questions will be multiple choice, so we'll obviously provide learners with what the actual right answers are, so that feedback is useful, and make sure that kind of is in place in good time. So I'm not going to go through everything because they're absolutely piling in, and some of them will be the same. Some of them we might need to just take back and then come back to you in terms of frequently asked questions. There's also some responses coming in related to discussion, and we're going to talk about the discussion in the next element, and we're going to ask that question. So hold that thought, and please do include it within your next response, because we're going to carry out the same process as we talk about the professional discussion itself. So keep those rolling in. Even though we're going to move on now, we will certainly look at them, and they will help to inform what our support proposition looks like, if we haven't already considered it and is part of our development so far. So, as promised, the professional discussion, third time lucky. So the professionals discussion, 50% weighting, excuse the paper. As I said, this will take a maximum of 45 minutes, and that's stipulated in the skills for care guidance, and that will have to take place in appropriate conditions, almost away from the kind of the workplace, so in controlled conditions, but a meeting room, somewhere quiet where a conversation between the endpoint assessor and the apprentice can take place in a formal manner. Now, the professional discussion itself, there's three key stages in organising professional discussion that an assessor and an apprentice will have to kind of consider in terms of preparation. So those key stages: prior planning. There's a lot of preparation that needs to go in place through what the apprentice needs to do to prepare, but also for the assessor to provide upfront information to the apprentice as to what how the professional discussion will work. Facilitating assessing, so the actual discussion itself happening in a formal way, in the right conditions, and allowing for the apprentice to achieve at the appropriate level for which they should, and also for the recording of outcomes. So those are the three main kind of areas of consideration related to a professional discussion. And obviously, this is quite a very important assessment component, and one which we're pretty new to apprentices moving forward. The professional discussion is a highly structured interview from the assessor's point of view, and that includes specific themes and outputs that should be achieved. From the viewpoint of the candidate, the method itself shouldn't feel that way. It should feel open, fluid and dynamic, so that they can offer insights, knowledge and input that is unprompted, but captured by the assessor as an outcome of the discussion. And I've sat on groups in adult care where this has been a really key point of focus in terms of what our endpoint assessors need to look like, and the skills that they will need to have to be able to run these types of professional discussions, and give the apprentice the best opportunity to achieve the best mark that they can. There will be a set of standard questions that will be asked of every candidate. Skills for Care will make these available online. We will use them as the template for what we do, and also for the guidance that we provide our customers through support. And that structured set of questions essentially allows our independent endpoint assessors to ask the apprentice to draw from prior learning, their prior learning on program, their experience on program, but also this self-assessment that the apprentice has completed before they've entered the endpoint assessment journey that we touched on at the start of the presentation. And that is a significant element of what that apprentice would need to do and be able for our assessor to be able to draw on. The assessors would agree a list of areas and points through an agenda that they wish the candidate to cover, and this agenda should be received by the apprentice in advance of the discussion, and that's an important element, and that's why in relation to the journey, we need to give some really good, clear guidance on the indicative timescales that will take, and allow our assessors to produce the appropriate agenda for the apprentice. The assessor's role is to manage the process, and we've touched on this, but to allow the candidate to prove their knowledge and understanding in a supported environment, but without the assessor consciously directing or leading the conversation. And again, this goes back to the point I made about the skill set of our assessors. Through our training and standardisation, we'll focusing not only on the adult care specific nature of the discussion that they will have to pull out for our training and standardisation, but also the skill set required to run effective professional discussions and be able to pull out all of this information. And going back to the setting, the controlled environment, it can be varied and dependent on the employment settings, but it's important that this type of assessment is distinctive from an interview, in which the questions are more highly structured, and this allows an element of objective comparison across all candidates, irrespective of the assessor, employer, or training provider, and that's really important in terms of the standardisation that we cover. But professional discussion itself would, within the 45 minutes, will allow for 15 semi-structured stimulus questions, and the assessor will be pulling out 3 or 4 themes that will be explored in more detail. So that's some of the specifics that our professional discussions will cover. And then finally, our assessors will complete a written record of the discussion to show how the points relating to the standards, the evidence requirements have been covered and graded. And it is a grading decision that is made by our endpoint assessor. In terms of recording, there are various options that we're exploring in terms of our assessors recording those professional discussions, and that could be a traditional paper-based logging of the evidence that the assessor has essentially covered, but also audio or videotaping and utilising remote technologies for that process. All of those are options that certainly are available for managing the professional discussion. So with that in mind, and the final point that I haven't actually covered yet is that the Trailblazer Group currently has determined that there's no resit opportunity for the professional discussion. That's probably an important area that obviously I haven't touched on just yet, but very important for you to know that currently there's no resit for that professional discussion. Therefore, the support that training providers, employers, and the remote materials that we can provide as an assessment organisation, very important to ensure that the apprentice is fully prepared to be able to enter that professional discussion. So, with that in mind, we'll move on to the second question, which relates directly to the professional discussion. So, same principles apply. What support should we consider to prepare apprentices for the professional discussion? Okay, and this is where I can pull on some of the responses I've had already whilst you're all looking at this. Mock assessments, a mock discussion video, how it would look like during a discussion. That's a very nice idea, and certainly one which we've indicated as being very important. So guidance in relation to preparation, but also what can we do to utilise other technologies to almost put the professional discussions in the mind's eye of the apprentice, but also in the mind's eye of the employer and the training provider who's going to be supporting the apprentice in terms of preparation. Grading criteria and videos of performance at different grading levels. So that's almost like the traditional sample marked learner work, but within a video format, which is a nice idea. Obviously, in terms of our support, and we'll go into this one of the final slides, we're looking at a phased development of our support materials so that we have a minimum product available for May, when most of the or some of the delivery will be starting, but we'll be building upon that support as we go, and we'll touch on that later in the session. Guidance in relation to preparation. I think use of technology comes up quite a number of times. Some really good responses. Again, don't stop in providing them. If anything comes to you, you'll have contact details at the end also. So that's it's useful to look at that. And we'll also be with customers who do want to work with Innovate. We'll be testing our support material with you, and also talking to customers on a regular basis as part of our almost steering group approach to development of support materials, to identify new approaches to support that we potentially could utilise that are specific to standards such as ad hoc care. So we'll move on towards the end of the presentation and today's session. Of course, keep sending your questions and your issues. So what does one of our endpoint assessors look like? And we've talked about this being a really important role that we're already beginning the recruitment of so far. Now, those assessors for each of the sectors that we look after will have to meet sector related guidance that's provided through the external quality assurer, but they do cover a very common thing. Our assessors will be independent. That's the us as an independent endpoint assessment organisation will have to ensure that our assessors are fair and impartial. That means that our assessors haven't been involved in the training of the specific apprentice on programs, so they are a new person in relation to the endpoint assessment process. They have to have up-to-date industry perspective. So not only do they have to have the workplace assessment qualification and assessment expertise, but they have to have occupational experience that's up to date. And not only is that occupational experience up to date in terms of when we recruit them to start working for us as an endpoint assessor, they have to have ongoing CPD that is evidence to us, and we will maintain through our endpoint assessment systems. And we touched on this throughout, especially in terms of the professional discussion, but they have to be good communicators, and they have to be flexible and be able to run effective professional discussions to enable the apprentice to achieve at the best of their ability. And that's absolutely key in terms of the assessment workforce that we're looking for. As I've said, we've already started the recruitment process for assessors for adult care. We're very keen to hear from you if it's something that you're interested in, or you have colleagues who would be interested in working in this field in the future. Not only will our endpoint assessors be taking on the role of assessors when we start delivering the endpoint assessment journey from next year, they'll also be invited to, where they have the relevant experience, to be involved in the assessment development process and also the support material development process. So you'll see at the end of the presentation some contact details. If it's something you or colleagues are interested in being involved in, then please do get in contact with us, and we'll make sure that we log you on our system and be in touch as soon as we're ready to begin the process. So finally, the last couple of slides from me before I pass back to Cathie to wrap up today's session is on grading. And we've talked about the grading criteria and the approach that we take to the sample papers. That's not the sample papers, sorry, the situational judgment test, but also to the decisions made by the assessors in terms of professional discussions. But the final grade will be dependent upon a combination of grades that the apprentice achieved. And this table here is taken from the assessment plan itself, and what I can do is give you some examples of how those final grades are achieved. So an example would be if an apprentice achieves a pass in the situational judgment test there. This is my chance to use my telestrator, and a distinction in the professional discussion there. You'll see that the final mark will be a merit overall there. So this table is available in the assessment plan itself, and you can see their approach there to those final grading decisions. And of course, that's what we'll be following as an endpoint assessment organisation. And the other thing to mention is that obviously we will be providing e-certs, and I think Cathie mentioned this at the start, for the achievements in the situational judgment test and the professional discussion itself. Okay, let's move to the final slide, and we talked about the support proposition, and work has already begun on this. And we've also talked about phased proposition approach, and this is just a chance to provide some insight as to what we've already identified and are looking at, and hopefully this tallies up quite nicely with what you as customers have provided, but also anything further we can look at in terms of adding to this program of development. So May 2017, when a number of organisations will begin delivery, we're looking at indicative assessment plans as general support, and we're doing that across all of the 14 standards we're already approved for, and that's to provide an indication of the length of time and the sorts of models that can be approached in terms of when the assessments will take place. So that's from the initial gateway to planning meeting right through to when the SFA certification process takes place. The webinar program you'll be aware of because you're on one now, but we'll be building upon that webinar program through the course of 2017, so that our endpoint assessment managers will be looking to deliver some bespoke programs for the standards they are responsible for. And that webinar program won't just be following a pattern across all of our standards. We'll be identifying some really key issues related to assessment for all of our stakeholders that are involved in the process. Exemplar questions, we'll be building on them so that we have a small bank available for May, and then we build further mock questions, mini on-screen tests, and then full mock papers. And as we've talked about, they're not just they'll be utilised for our own system, as well as paper-based opportunities as well. So that we cover all angles that will be available. And we'll also have a how-to kind of guide for the on-screen testing platform itself as well. And then we've identified a number of different things for the professional discussion. Guidance for not only for the training provider or the apprentice, but also the employer, how they can support the apprentice to prepare for the professional discussion, some ideas and concepts, and really to get them to understand what it is and how it will work. And you see we've identified the opportunity to utilise video, and we're always looking for different and innovative ways of delivering this guidance further and above just a paper-based approach. So that's pretty much the detail for the adult care, lead adult care standards from Innovate's perspective. I'm going to hand back to Cathie now to just wrap up today's session and give you a little bit more information about the costs.
Thanks, Andy. Pricing then. We've done a lot of work on the pricing structure. You won't be surprised to hear. And we are in a situation now where we can actually give you some indicative prices for these two standards. All of our pricing does fall within the affordability statement set within each assessment plan. And they are indicative, so they are negotiable. And these will depend on a number of things, not least volume, but also on the availability of assessment, of suitable assessment centres, if you like, within premises that we wouldn't have to then pay for ourselves. So we will take into consideration the circumstances of the various cohorts of learners that will be going through the assessment. So the indicative costs for the two standards are in fact £595 each, and that price is inclusive of all the external quality assurance payments to be made and other components. As I say, we are happy to offer discount on volume and on any other basis. So if you would like to contact us on this website, on this email address here, we will send you some details that we would need from you to enable us to give you a fixed price on that basis. So all that needs for me to say is thank you very much indeed for your time today. We finished a little bit early, although I have a few other things to say. Our next webinars are Friday the 7th of April, and we will be dealing with the Level 2 Customer Service, Level 3 Team Leading, Level 5 Operations and Departmental Manager. Then on April the 21st, we'll be dealing with the retail sector. So there's three assessment plans we'll be covering in that session, Level 2, Level 3 and Level 4. Please book on to the webinars, even if you can't attend, because you will be given access to a recording later on. So thank you very much indeed. I hope you found today useful. And here are the details of Andy's and my phone numbers and the EPA Innovate Awarding email that you can send any inquiries to. We will be getting back to you on the questions that you've asked today. So thank you very much indeed for your participation, and I hope you found it useful. See you again soon. Bye-bye.